The story begins with a revelation that feels almost impossible to believe. A blueprint for an aircraft that requires no fuel, no traditional engines, and no dependence on fossil fuels is circulating in the hands of a few daring engineers. For decades, the aviation industry has been chained to jet fuel, a commodity that dictates both the cost of flight and the scale of emissions. Yet here, in front of them, lay designs that could defy everything we know about flight. The concept is simple in appearance but extraordinary in implication. Instead of burning fuel to generate thrust, the blueprint outlines an energy system that harnesses naturally occurring electromagnetic waves. These invisible forces, which constantly surround us, could be converted into power for propulsion. Imagine an aircraft that doesn't refuel, that doesn't emit carbon, that simply taps into the energy that already exists around the planet. To most, it sounds like fiction, but the blueprints are detailed, technical, and chillingly precise. When a handful of scientists first reviewed the documents, they dismissed them as fantasy. The math, however, was undeniable. The propulsion system wasn't based on combustion or batteries, but on resonance frequencies and wave amplification, techniques that some experimental labs have toyed with but never mastered on a large scale. The promise was staggering: unlimited flight time, zero emissions, and aircraft that could circle the globe without stopping. The blueprints, allegedly tied to independent African inventor Maxwell, hint at a bold leap beyond conventional science. Some engineers whispered about suppressed patents and breakthroughs that had been buried by powerful interests unwilling to see fuel monopolies collapse. Others wondered if the technology was simply too dangerous, too disruptive, to be released into the world. After all, an aircraft that never needs fuel would rewrite not only the airline industry but also military strategy, logistics, and global trade. Soon, rumors spread. A prototype had been partially constructed, a small-scale test model that demonstrated lift using the same wireless energy principles outlined in the designs. Witnesses claimed to have seen it hover, powered not by kerosene but by invisible waves. If true, it meant the blueprints were more than just theoretical, they were actionable. But with such a revelation came enormous risks. Who controls the skies if aircraft are no longer bound by fuel? Who benefits, and who stands to lose billions in revenue? For the skeptics, the absence of peer-reviewed validation was reason enough to dismiss the claims. Yet history is littered with breakthroughs that once seemed impossible. Heavier-than-air flight itself was ridiculed before the Wright brothers took off at Kitty Hawk. Could this be another turning point, the moment aviation takes its most radical leap forward since the jet engine? And so, behind closed doors, the blueprints continue to circulate. Investors whisper. Engineers tinker. And a select few insiders are beginning to ask a question that could change the course of human mobility. Is the world ready for a fuel-less aircraft, and if so, how long before it takes to the skies? Whispers soon gave way to anticipation when reports surfaced that a prototype demonstration was scheduled, not in a grand aerospace facility in Europe or America, but in a secluded hangar on the outskirts of Johannesburg. Security was tight, and invitations were scarce. Those who were allowed inside were told they were about to witness a piece of technology that might never again be shown so openly. The aircraft that stood before them was not large, more akin to a sleek glider than a jumbo jet, but its design carried an otherworldly edge. Its wings tapered with unusual symmetry, fitted with panels that shimmered faintly under the lights, as though absorbing energy directly from the environment. There were no fuel tanks, no exhaust pipes, no roaring turbines. Instead, beneath the body ran a lattice of copper coils, magnetized plates, and embedded circuitry, the physical manifestation of the blueprints that had captured the imagination of so many. When the engineers approached the craft, silence filled the hangar. There was no ignition sequence as one would expect. No kerosene fumes, no spinning propellers. With a faint hum, the coils began to glow, faint arcs of blue energy dancing across the metallic plates. Slowly, impossibly, the craft began to lift from the ground. Its movement was smooth, controlled, deliberate, as if the very air beneath it had been transformed into an invisible runway. Gasps echoed among the attendees. No one had ever seen an aircraft rise this way, without the deafening roar of combustion or the whine of electric motors. It hovered, steady as a drone, then pivoted gracefully, demonstrating full control. The lead engineer, speaking through a microphone, explained that what they were witnessing was not magic but resonance, electromagnetic frequencies tuned in such a way that they provided continuous, sustainable lift and thrust. The craft then moved forward, gliding silently across the airstrip, accelerating without a drop of fuel burned. It circled once, twice, then climbed higher into the night sky, leaving behind stunned observers who could hardly process what they were seeing. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. With each moment, disbelief gave way to awe. This was no fluke, no trick. The fuel-less aircraft was real, and it was flying. As it landed softly back onto the runway, whispers turned to questions. How had this technology been hidden for so long? Why was it being unveiled now, and to such a small group? Some speculated that powerful governments would swoop in to either suppress or seize the invention. Others believed it was the beginning of a new era, one in which energy scarcity no longer dictated the limits of aviation. But one thing was certain. The moment the footage leaked beyond that hangar, the world would never look at flight the same way again. Within hours, snippets of the test flight began appearing online. Grainy videos, filmed discreetly by attendees, spread like wildfire across forums and social media. At first, many dismissed them as elaborate CGI or another internet hoax. But then clearer footage surfaced, an unmistakable aircraft gliding through the night, lifting effortlessly without turbines, flames, or propellers. Newsrooms scrambled to verify the authenticity. Analysts slowed the footage frame by frame, looking for signs of editing, but found none. The consensus began to shift. This wasn't fake. Something extraordinary had happened in that Johannesburg hangar. By the next morning, headlines flashed across major outlets. "Fuel-less aircraft takes flight," screamed the New York Times. "Aviation miracle or elaborate stunt?" asked the BBC. And in Silicon Valley, whispers turned into urgent boardroom meetings. Aerospace giants like Boeing and Airbus, and even defense contractors, demanded answers. Governments were equally unsettled. Leaked memos from the U.S. Department of Defense suggested deep concern. If the technology was real, the military implications were staggering. Aircraft that could stay aloft indefinitely, without fuel supply chains, could rewrite the rules of defense and warfare. Meanwhile, African leaders hailed the demonstration as a turning point, proof that the continent could pioneer breakthroughs that the rest of the world had failed to deliver. Investors smelled opportunity. Tech billionaires, some previously dismissive of fringe innovations, scrambled to make contact with the inventors. A quiet race began in the background, not just to understand the science, but to own it. Yet with the excitement came fear. Energy lobbyists, particularly those tied to oil and aviation fuel, reportedly began pressuring governments to intervene. A technology that could render fossil-fueled flight obsolete posed an existential threat to trillion-dollar industries. But none of that mattered to the public. For ordinary people across the globe, the video clips represented hope. Hope for cleaner skies, cheaper travel, and an end to the idea that progress was only possible through massive corporations or powerful nations. In cafes, classrooms, and online forums, people debated endlessly. Was this the dawn of a new age of aviation, or just a fleeting dream soon to be buried under politics and corporate greed? And while the world argued, the engineers behind the craft quietly prepared for their next move. They knew one successful test was not enough. They had to prove it beyond doubt. The decision was made. The next test would not be behind closed doors. This time, the world would watch. Weeks of preparation followed, with secrecy tighter than ever. Engineers triple-checked every circuit, every panel, every line of code that governed the strange electromagnetic systems driving the aircraft. Rumors swirled that a global livestream was being arranged, though no one could confirm it. Finally, the day arrived. The location, an undisclosed airstrip on the outskirts of Namibia, chosen for its wide-open skies and relatively quiet surroundings. Satellite trucks and broadcast vans lined the perimeter, as journalists from CNN, Al Jazeera, BBC, and countless YouTube channels jostled for the best vantage points. Unlike the first flight, this was no grainy leak. This was center stage. When the hangar doors creaked open, a collective gasp swept through the crowd. The aircraft looked sleeker now, its frame polished, glowing faintly as if alive. Gone were the rough prototype features. This was a machine that looked ready for history. The pilot stepped forward, his flight suit marked only by a simple insignia, a rising sun over Africa. He climbed into the cockpit with calm precision, the crowd holding its breath as silence fell over the airfield. Then, without warning, the aircraft came alive. Not with the deafening roar of turbines, but with a quiet hum that resonated in people's bones. It lifted straight up, smooth as a whisper. Cameras zoomed in, capturing every detail. The wings extended, shimmering in the sunlight, and then, with impossible grace, the craft surged forward into the sky. Higher and higher it climbed, leaving no exhaust, no contrails, only awe in its wake. The livestream chat exploded. Viewers across the globe flooded comments, "Impossible! We're watching history. This changes everything." Within minutes, hashtags trended worldwide. #FuellLessFlight, #Future of Aviation, #Africa Rising. Then came the moment that silenced even the skeptics. The aircraft performed maneuvers no fuel-powered jet could sustain. Sharp ascents, sudden stops mid-air, gliding effortlessly before accelerating again. For nearly 2 hours, it remained airborne, an endurance that mocked the idea of limited fuel reserves. When it finally descended, touching down as softly as a feather, the crowd erupted in cheers. Reporters rushed forward, questions flying. But the inventors stayed composed, offering only a single statement: "This is only the beginning." That evening, the world didn't just react, it shook. Governments called emergency meetings. Airlines saw their stock values plummet overnight. Oil futures wavered as traders realized the unthinkable: the very foundation of global aviation had just been cracked. But in living rooms, schools, and crowded internet cafes from New York to Nairobi, one thought echoed louder than all the rest. If flight no longer needed fuel, what else was possible? The pressure was immediate and unrelenting. Within 24 hours of the demonstration, major aviation corporations dispatched private envoys to Namibia, each desperate to secure an exclusive partnership. Boeing, Airbus, and Lockheed Martin all dangled billion-dollar offers, cloaked under the guise of collaboration. At the same time, government delegations scrambled to make contact, though their motivations were less clear. Some spoke of global cooperation, others hinted at national security concerns. Behind closed doors, intelligence agencies drafted reports warning that such a disruptive technology could destabilize entire economies if not contained. Oil-rich nations, feeling the tremors of panic, began lobbying for immediate restrictions. Anonymous memos leaked, revealing phrases like technological containment strategy and controlled rollout. The message was clear: the establishment feared chaos. Meanwhile, the inventors, who had long been dismissed as dreamers or frauds, found themselves under siege. Their phones buzzed with constant calls, their emails flooded with offers, threats, and pleas. Surveillance increased, unfamiliar vehicles appeared outside their hotels at night. It was as though the whole world was trying to pull their creation in different directions at once. But what no one expected was their next move. Instead of aligning with one power, they went public again. This time, not with a flight, but with the blueprints themselves. Released in encrypted form across decentralized networks, the files spread too quickly to be contained. Within hours, engineers and hackers around the globe were downloading them, dissecting them, testing them. The cat was out of the bag. The reaction was electric. University labs in India, Germany, and Brazil claimed they were already working on replication. In Silicon Valley, startups sprang to life overnight, branding themselves as pioneers of post-fuel aviation. African nations, long sidelined in global tech revolutions, suddenly found themselves at the center of the storm. For once, the innovation had emerged from their soil, and they were not willing to let it slip away. As the debate raged, another revelation came to light. Documents surfaced suggesting the inventors had been inspired by obscure research dating back decades, experiments buried deep in archives and dismissed by mainstream science. It wasn't magic, it was rediscovery, refinement, and courage to pursue what others had abandoned. In Washington, London, and Beijing, urgent summits convened. Leaders debated: should this be embraced or suppressed? Could airlines transition fast enough to survive? What would happen to millions employed in the oil and fuel industries? Would this technology spark a renaissance, or a geopolitical collapse? And yet, as those questions loomed, something undeniable had taken root. For the first time in modern history, humanity glimpsed the possibility of flight without fuel. The skies, once symbols of limitation, now felt infinite.